We're coming to you from the SecurityMetrics Threat Intelligence Center, where we secure networks and we do all kinds of cool, fun things, stopping cyber threats. I'm Heff.
And I'm Forrest.
And we've got an action-packed show. We're going to talk about Ubiquiti. We're going to talk about the recent Capitol breaches, and we're going to talk about some other fun things in the news regarding SolarWinds and some data privacy stuff. So stay tuned. Stay with us. You know what time it is, Forrest?
Spin us in, DJ.
All right, so Forrest, we're back. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us. As always, we try to have a good time. If you subscribe and we hit about 5,000 subscribers, I'll do my amazing Chris Farley impersonation, big guy in a little coat. But again, we got to have the subscribers. So we appreciate you joining us on this crazy journey that is cybersecurity. Security.
Never a dull moment.
Right? So this photo, Forrest, of these Capitol folks that were inside the Capitol, this one really caught me off guard. Have you seen it?
Yeah. Talk about historic, man. It's pretty crazy. Just the reading the response from various physical security folks and sysadmins and a lot on places like Twitter and Reddit. This is a physical security nightmare. Especially when it comes to cyber, this level of breach is just monumental. You may potentially be looking at having to roll every system that you have. You could be looking at potential hardware implants. I mean, all bets are off essentially.
Yeah, and we don't know what these folks were taking video of or photos of. We don't know if it was sensitive contents or not. I mean, you just want to assume. You assume that it is sensitive material. But now we have this huge data lake. I mean, imagine if you're a company and you basically just let...
You want to come in?
You let anybody in your company, right? You let anybody in. And they're just taking photos and videos of everything, and who knows where they're sending it. So it makes it a real challenge for our folks in the government that have to protect it. And the one story that really caught my eye, and this one was the one that just, I mean, you talk about knocking your socks off here, Forrest. This lady named Riley Williams. And
that's a sad day.
What comes to mind for me is when I hear the word Riley, I think of that movie Inside Out. My kids love that movie Inside Out. I think of Riley and I think of sadness, when this happened.
Yeah. She's got the glasses for it, that's for sure.
Oh my gosh. So the story goes, allegedly she entered Nancy Pelosi's office and grabbed a laptop from a conference room. And, allegedly the laptop was just a PowerPoint laptop. So I think to myself, here's 22 years old, stealing a laptop. And then the potential is she was allegedly trying to sell it to a friend in Russia and trying to maybe make some bank off of it. And the story goes, all the laptop had on it, because it was in the conference room, all it had was PowerPoint documents. Whew.
Yeah, that's pretty rough for that young lady. That's a lot. The feds don't mess around when it comes to that kind of stuff. So, I feel bad, but also actions have consequences. So. We'll see what happens. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want somebody breaking into our building and trying to steal equipment and potentially sell it to adversaries. So that's it's a rough situation all around, and just a very sad time.
Yeah, and you think about it. I mean, you're taking a laptop with just PowerPoint on it. So you're 22 years old. You throw your whole life away over a laptop with PowerPoint on it. But it raises a lot of questions from a cybersecurity perspective. And obviously, a lot of the information that we know about is a lot of these drives were encrypted. A lot of them had beacons, the ability to beacon back to its owner. So they were able to retrieve a lot of the laptops. But this one allegedly was potentially destroyed. We don't know yet. So FBI is still investigating. But it's definitely a sad situation with this breach all around. And on this state secrets that get out there. So in addition to all of the SolarWinds stuff that just happened, it's just like one thing, Forrest, on top of another, on top of another. It just doesn't stop, does it?
No, man. It has been a nonstop just roller coaster ride for the last month or so. I'm exhausted trying to keep up with all of it, man. It's been absolutely absurd.
It has been. And that kind of brings us to our next point, which was this foreign advisory activity notification. And, we get a lot of these a lot of the time about what is actually happening out there. And there's some good information about what Russia, what China is doing, and essentially Iran trying to promote and do subversive activities. But it's just highlighting how insane it is right now. And the Office of Intelligence and Analysis put out a really great reference aid, helping all of us try to understand contextually what's happening at the big picture, 50,000 foot view. But boy, Forrest, you're right. It is exhausting trying to figure it all out, trying to put together all the pieces of this puzzle. And plus, we've got a new president coming in line here, and that just complicates matters too. When you have the transition of power, you have all of these cyber events, and all of it compounding together. It's like a giant stone soup, all of it being mixed together, just trying to protect all of our clients and everyone that's out there.
Yeah, it's the thing that I thought was really interesting about this announcement on the media efforts. I mean, misinformation and disinformation is a dime a dozen. It's you can put out all kinds of misleading stuff, but to try and overcome that it takes a lot more effort.
And then you combine that. I mean, it's like the perfect storm right now. You combine that with a lot of folks upset about the way the country's being run, and then you've got a lot of folks that are actually happy about that. Happy about that. So you got like this crazy mix of unhappy and happy people that are willing to believe anything that's pushed in front of them. And then on top of all that, this crackdown on the big tech industry, especially with all the conversations around Parler. And I'm sure you've seen a lot of that in the news too.
Oh yeah. A lot of discussion, a lot of people going back and forth, various freedom of speech arguments and private platform arguments and Section 230, and it's exhausting at this point. I have offloaded that whole issue over to the EFF. I'll let them handle it.
Yeah, that is their job, isn't it? So talking about Parler for a moment, that was really big in the news after Amazon shut them down. And now what we're seeing is this hacker group, UG Nazi, essentially going after Parler, and they are just threatening them like crazy. And it's not just the CEO that's being threatened, it's the employees of the company. So our Parler's based in Vegas. I have quite a few friends at that company, and a lot of them are just in shock that it's not just going after the company itself, but then it's about going after the employees, which is really disheartening.
Yeah, this whole UG Nazi, man, looking at some of the history of that group, there's some pretty crazy stuff. Even a person was murdered. Like it's gnarly. Like if you've got some time, definitely check it out. It's insanity.
Well, UG Nazi was big in the news roughly 2012, if you guys all remember. They were the ones that allegedly took down Twitter for about 40 minutes. So supposedly these folks are back in the news now, and they're doing some nutty stuff, going after companies, especially companies that they don't like, and going after their CEO, John Matze. So it's going to continue in the news, but we do have other stories to get to, and we should not stop at that. Forrest, you know what? I think it's a red alert time here, Forrest.
Red alert. All hands stand to battle stations.
We got to talk about Ubiquiti. Yeah. What are you thinking?
Yeah. Is it Ubiquiti?
Yeah. I always say tie. I like tie. Ubiquiti.
Like authority.
Right. Authority. I got Ubiquiti.
Yeah. This Ubiquiti breach is it's pretty rough. Mostly because they started putting a lot of their firmware updates required you to have authorization. So you needed to have a user account set up with them in order to update your devices. So what makes this Ubiquiti breach, kind of insult to injury is they started putting their firmware updates behind an authorization wall. So you needed to have a user account set up with them in order to download firmware updates for your devices. Now that they've been breached, it's kind of called that whole model into question. A lot of very upset users on their forums that are pretty upset with this development.
Yeah, Brian Krebs. If you guys don't follow Brian Krebs, obviously he's amazing journalist about cybersecurity, but he did a really, really good blog this week about kind of highlighting users that are upset about, having to rely on infrastructure, ubiquitized infrastructure for authentication of accessing your devices. So we've highlighted a little bit of that here in our notes for all of you to see. But if you get a chance to read up on Krebs on his blog, we've included a link in our description here. You can click on it and take a read. But it's fascinating stuff. And this breach is huge because you think about, all of not just small businesses that use their products, but a lot of home folks use this stuff too. So it's a major, major catastrophe to kick off 2021.
Yeah, especially when it comes to things like prosumer devices. It's always embarrassing when something like that blows up in your face, and it just leaves you kind of burned.
Yeah. Well, from time to time, we're going to switch gears now. From time to time, we like to take a look at how much things cost on the dark web. And this is your moment, folks. If you've ever wondered, if you're not on the dark web and you're curious, when hackers put things up for sale, how much do things sell for? And what kind of dollar value do you attach to that kind of stuff? So Job and Talent had 11 million records breached as of this morning, as of today, as of the 17th. There we go, January 17th. I get my date screwed up, Forrest. But yeah, January 17th, we have Job and Talent had 11 million records up for sale on the dark web, and they're going for, we put the prices up on the screen there. You can kind of get an idea of how much the records go for, but 93 million records so far, thanks to Troy Hunt, and he retweeted that out there. So just be aware of those kind of things. The dollar value fluctuates from time to time on these accounts, but with so many records out there now on the web, the dollar value will fluctuate. Obviously, it's just supply and demand. So that's it's interesting stuff for us, for me, and for all of us in the community. Malwarebytes breached, Forrest. Oh man, if things could get any worse.
Yeah.
Why?
It's the defenders. When the defenders are the ones being attacked, it's always especially hard.
And they were hacked allegedly by the same group that breached SolarWinds. So now we've got four. Let me make sure you get that right. Four major cybersecurity firms that have been attacked, and you include Microsoft in there, FireEye, CrowdStrike, Malwarebytes, all by that same group that hit SolarWinds.
Yeah, they're taking names, that's for sure.
So these threat actors allegedly they breached the internal systems. Access that they gained was to essentially just a limited subset of internal company emails. It was all within their O365 tenant. Now we believe that it's a dormant email protection product that was accessed. Obviously you trust but verify. So we don't know. There is quite a few lessons learned, and we're going to talk. That's kind of the theme for the rest of the deck, for the rest of the recording here. It's just lessons learned. What can we learn and take away from all of these breaches that keep happening?
Yeah, it's especially when it comes to defending your infrastructure, and a lot of this is happening from within. It's very hard to defend against that kind of attack. So thankfully, I think the bulk majority of the industry isn't going to have to worry about this level of sophistication. But for those that do, it's it is all hands on deck.
Yeah, no kidding. And from a lessons learned perspective, best practices, it's really about getting in there and auditing your hardware, auditing your software, knowing what's in your environment, and you have to do that on the regular. But there's obviously a lot more that you can do on top of all that. You're looking for the warning signs for malicious behavior in your environment, and you're not going to catch everything. We always have a saying: "He who defends everything defends nothing" around here, and that's the truth. I mean, you're gonna spend majority of your efforts on trying to get the crown jewels under control, trying to lock those suckers down. But beyond all that, the auditing of the apps and auditing of the source code would have really helped in the Malwarebytes breach. So let's flip gears for a moment, Forrest. We're still talking about SolarWinds, and we're going to continue probably talking about it for the rest of the year. But what's great from our perspective, and all of you in the audience, is having some sort of visual diagram of what happened, a timeline. And when you get these timelines, it really gives a sense of perspective and context of when things happen, where we're currently at in the situation. And thankfully, we do have a timeline, and we put it up on the screen here if you're able to watch the show. But this attack timeline is very helpful, and especially when now we talk about the latest news with SolarWinds. Drum roll, please. Forrest, do we have a drum roll? Sunspot, the third malware. Why?
Yeah, the gift that just keeps on giving.
My gosh. So we've got this third malware discovered, and it's called Sunburst, also known as SolarGate. It's a teardrop malware. It's a backdoor. We don't know officially who it's being attributed to, and that's the nice thing about companies like CrowdStrike and FireEye, in that they take their time and they do things right. So they're doing their due diligence, and because of that, we don't have attribution to a specific nation state or specific country. We have in the news, though, they're talking about Forrest. They're talking about who it's being attributed to, potentially Russia.
Yeah, that's been the biggest lead that I've seen so far, is this large push for Russian attribution. But at the same time, they've been very hesitant to not put a specific label on there, so they have their generic identifier that they're still operating with, that they have been from the beginning. So they definitely want to make sure, if they're pointing fingers, they are very certain it's them.
Yeah, and you don't want to screw this up. It's really critical that we get the right threat actor identified. Thankfully, Kaspersky has done, the security experts over there, they've done a pretty good job of examining this Sunburst malware, and they found a lot of similarities in the code with another malware called Kazar, and I'm probably butchering that. I'm sorry, folks. But essentially, there's a lot of shared features, and because of that, we're able to give a little bit more attribution to a Russian threat actor.
Starting to build some case for it.
So Forrest, identifying and attributing the malware and who it's attributed to is really important for companies like CrowdStrike and FireEye, especially when you talk about the news media picking up on, well, it's likely Russian in origin. That's the headlines that I'm seeing. But that designation for national security purposes is really critical, and it's important that we nail it and we get it right.
Most definitely. We don't want to be throwing, flinging things around the room, lest we're certain that, the person on the other end actually deserves that. I thought a very interesting approach was, what's his name? Malware Jake Williams, yes. I believe.
Yes.
Yes. He has the I don't know where he got it from, but he said the Simpsons attribution. A lot of the time, when you're doing incident response initially, getting the attribution right doesn't matter as much as getting the environment back under control. So, people are always asking, who did it? And it's like, well, if I told you that the Simpsons did it, would it change your approach?
Right. Keeping the lights on is what a lot of CISOs would tell you. What's our job right now? It's keeping the lights on. And unfortunately, we're getting hit from all different angles here. What's great, though, Forrest, about our world of cyber is the after-action reports and after-action reviews, and really trying to dial in and figure out what the lessons learned are. So with the SolarWinds breach, there's a lot of fascinating articles out there regarding what we learned, how do we become more vigilant, and we wanted to highlight at least one of them for you. Tech Republic did a really good, I thought, a really good examination of what we're learning from this breach. And there's a lot of activities that people can take to potentially prevent something like this from really getting out of control again and having another issue like this. So I don't know, Forrest, I'm sure you probably have a few things, what you think should be done to stop another breach like this. And the news media has their own take as well.
Yeah. I definitely think postmortems are super valuable. You're able to get a high concentration of information in, usually a fairly short report. So it really cuts through all the speculation and all that, and is just dealing with, okay, here's what factually happened. Here are all the different factors, and here's how we mitigated it, that sort of thing. These software supply chain kind of breaches. I mean, it's very difficult to try and combat them, but there are some things that can be done. For instance, like reproducible builds, where you're able to take just source code and compile it and get a one-for-one copy of what the release should be. You're not dependent on anybody doing that compilation for you. You have that available, and you can get from eggs and flour all the way to your cake, and not need to have any sort of trust in the rest of the line.
Yeah, speaking of cake, putting candles on the cake is always important. But let's talk about some of these after action review stuff. So, with cyber, you always want to skate to where the puck is going. So, that old what is it, that old hockey player Gretzky, was it? Skate to where I don't skate to where the puck has been. I skate to where the puck is going. And a lot of organizations are making changes. Thankfully, they're making changes. They're putting even more emphasis on cyber. And one of the two changes that came to my eye is a lot of companies are spending more time on investor relations, especially when you have to report it to the FTC. You got to report it to all these government agencies, at least here in the US. So the more emphasis is being placed on the importance of investor relations. And then the second area that is getting a little bit more looked at is more pen testing and targeted pen testing more than anything, looking for signs of compromise and testing controls and doing it routinely, not just one time a year, but you're doing it multiple times, looking for those vulnerabilities.
Yeah, red teaming is always a very, very important aspect. Making sure that you're not leaving anything behind. You're taking the initiative. That's the word I'm looking for. Sorry. Taking the initiative to actually try and shore things up before there's a problem. Doing your due diligence.
Well, and talk about due diligence now. The CISA put out a warning about cloud attacks, and they're bypassing MFA, which is really scary. When you think about, and these attacks, Forrest, are opportunistic attacks, which are it's like low-hanging fruit a lot of times, and companies don't even think about the low-hanging fruit until it's too late.
Especially where it's, if you're able to target a vendor that is, that's even higher, payoff than if you were to just go after an individual organization, just because, once you're in there, you have the pick of the litter at that point.
You do. You absolutely do. So with all of these workers working remotely, you have this mix of the corporate laptops, personal devices, again, the perfect storm building. And what CISA did is they put out a warning about these opportunistic attacks. They gave out a few examples. And again, this is like your basic cyber hygiene, not using VPNs, phishing emails, education, security awareness. Employees are clicking on these, oh, you have a secure message email, I better click on it. And the next thing you know is they're getting popped. The other thing that caught my eye was the pass the cookie attacks, which we've always known about. But I mean, if you can bypass every MFA checkpoint, multi-factor authentication checkpoint, that's maddening for an organization to try to defend that. And then on top of all that, another example CISA put out was modifying your email forwarding rules. So if the threat actor can get in there and modify it and forward all the emails to their location, it's bad news bears, that's for sure.
Yeah. Being able to set up essentially a pipe of direct communications. They get a copy of everything that is coming into your inbox. That's a big point. Is email is generally kind of the holy grail. All of your other accounts are typically dependent on you having access to your email to be able to access those services. So if somebody can get your email, they can get your password reset tokens for any other service. They can do all kinds of nastiness. So it's a very, very juicy target.
So if we're going to kind of wrap up the show here in a little bit, but we've got to talk about malware incidents on the rise. And Forrest.
Seriously,
Forrest?
Seriously.
Malware incidents on the rise. So Wandera put out a survey. They basically found that 52% of organizations experienced some sort of malware incident on remote devices in 2020. That's an increase, hold on to your hats, folks, of 37% from 2019. So that's a huge metric to be aware of. And if you're in an environment where you have MDM or you don't, you need to keep this on your radar that this malware is not going to stop. And with more remote workers, the malware is just going to keep increasing.
Yeah, I saw a blog from a Google Android developer who had been working with the Android team for several years. I think it was like 7 or so years, and he had malware on his device. So if even an Android developer that works full time for Google is getting hit with this stuff, it's pretty prevalent. So yeah, it just speaks to how difficult it is to avoid it.
And now you have such a huge geographic footprint you've got to defend against. It doesn't make it any more easier. So the other thing that caught our eye in the news is the FBI warning about vishing attacks. And Forrest, I think we should do a little answer. What is vishing? I don't think everybody knows in the audience. Vishing. I thought it was phishing. No, it's phishing now.
No, there's phishing, there's vishing, there's smishing, there's I don't know how many variants. You just smash ishing and whatever you want to on the front, and you just make it happen.
Pretty soon, so we're gonna have every letter in the alphabet in front of the word ishing, and then we'll just have 26 different types of phishing with each letter of the alphabet.
I dig it. So seriously though, vishing is voice phishing. So usually phone calls. Usually it's a means of social engineering. So if you've ever seen any of the social engineering village stuff at DEF CON, it's deadly. This stuff can be very convincing. There's just watching these people work is like magic. They are able to manipulate human psychology and play people like a fiddle. It's incredible. I highly encourage you to check out some of those talks.
Yeah, and this phishing stuff. I mean, when you're attacking somebody over the phone, and you're able to do it with such a convincing tone and cadence and pace in your voice, you can pretty much trick anyone. I know I've been hit a couple times with phishing. Never actually was. I was attacked, but I was never actually clicking or listening or taking action on any of that phishing stuff. But it's very disheartening. It's very upsetting to see these attacks on the rise. We've always had phishing for the most part, but it just seems like now more attack vectors available to the bad guy, and they're just really just jumping on this. With people working from home and having their cell phone on them, it just makes an easier target for them. So this stuff will keep on the rise. All right, Forrest, kind of wrapping up the show, we've got to talk about Microsoft and CVE 2020-1472. We thought it was patched back in August, and nope. What can you tell us about this? A little bit more deep diving for folks that are not familiar with it.
So this one was dependent on how you had your Active Directory configured, but it essentially targeted the service that allowed for user management, and you could allow somebody to essentially make themselves a domain administrator. So it looks like they have now fully plugged the issue there, and so now that should no longer be a problem.
This is critical that this gets enabled from an enterprise standpoint. If it impacts your environment and you're using Active Directory, then the zero login flaw absolutely needs to be something that needs to be on your radar. And if you've not already done the patch, well, just be aware that Microsoft is now enabling the enforcement mode by default. So very helpful from that perspective. All right, Forrest, let's wrap it up here. We love talking about privacy. I love talking about cyber governance. We don't do it enough. We always get so caught up in if it bleeds, it leads. That's the headlines.
Yeah.
But I love talking about privacy and data breach notification laws and that kind of stuff. And we don't do enough of it on our show. We need to spend more time on it. But the EDPB, which is the European Data Privacy Breach, they set up some new draft guidelines for breach notification. These are just drafts, so they're not officially yet. But what helps is when you have these kind of guidelines, is it helps your organization develop playbooks and making sure that you cover all your T's and dot all your I's, that you don't forget anything in your own breach notification language that you have in your organization. So EDPB has released a draft form. We've included the links for everything we've talked about today, but this is a good one to get involved in and read, at least get an understanding of what some of the changes are to data breach notifications. And a lot of companies, Forrest, a lot of firms, they have nothing when it comes to data breach notification. So having some kind of language and dialogue is important.
Yeah, definitely. I know the various legal departments out there always want to be ahead of the game with regards to some kind of notification, because there's far too many instances where you could get some slapped with some decent consequences for failing to notify your customer base.
No kidding. Absolutely. Well, Forrest, this is the end for this week. We love when you guys join us. I hope you had a good time. I know we did. It's always fun talking about stuff like cyber. Sometimes the news isn't pleasant, but sometimes, what it is we learn from it and we try to improve every single day. So thanks for joining us. Please subscribe if you can. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, all the major channels, YouTube, Stitcher. So, and thanks again, guys. You have a great rest of your week.
Yep. Take care.